We're looking at part 8, and as I said in the introduction, it's really hard to figure out a strict chronological life of Jesus Christ. A lot of the Gospels repeat the same thing, but they give it in a different order. So, you think, okay, this one is here. Then you read the other gospel and it's in a different position. Like in Matthew, it's right after this, but in Luke, it's right after something else. And so trying to figure out when everything happened and when everything took place in a chronological order is very difficult. In fact, for me, that's probably the hardest thing, is figuring out what to look at next, because it is hard to figure out the exact chronological order. But if we go back to the temptation where we ended last week, we go back to the temptation of Jesus in chapter 4. We find the temptation of Jesus, and after Satan had tried everything under the sun, in verse 11, said, then the devil leaveth him. In Luke, it said, when the devil had ended all the temptation, he departed from him for a season. So that we know that this was right after the temptation by Satan to get Jesus to sin. He tried the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. And we spent a lot of time looking at those three and how that every temptation we encounter falls into the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, or the pride of life. But though he tried all three on Jesus, nothing worked. He could not get Jesus to sin. Then it said he departed for a season. In other words, for just a short time. Satan doesn't give up. One of the things you have to admit about Satan is he never, never, never gives up. That's why in America he has been so successful in pulling off the LGBTQ. He's been very successful in getting evolution down, what's the word? Pushed down the throat of our children. He tried it. He lost. He waits a little while. He departs for a season. Then he comes back. If he loses that, he just keeps trying. And if he loses the whole package, he'll settle for a centimeter. And then he'll try again. Maybe this time he'll get an inch. And then he'll depart and come back and try it again. And he'll get a little bit more. And today we see things that my dad would have died had he even thought these things would exist. I was reading in a magazine this week, and it warned you that when you read the article, it was very blunt, but most of us are adults, at least physically. And so he was talking about that the LGBTQ, at first, all they wanted was acceptance. Just accept us for what we are. Then they began demanding equal rights. Now they want superior rights. And he was talking about a parade, and I don't remember where the parade was, but he said it was in a major city, and the LGBTQ crowd were walking buck naked down the middle of a street in a parade with men, women, boys, and girls, little children, watching the parade go by. And here go these buck-naked men, buck-naked women. Where did they get there? Satan tried, didn't work, but he gained a millimeter. Then next time he came back and gained 2 millimeters. And then, he's up to a centimeter. And then he's up to an inch. And Now he's got almost everything he wants. By the way, did anybody hear about the Supreme Court ruling today? You were at work. Don't you listen to the radio at work? Oh. Anyway, Tennessee, the state of Tennessee had passed a law. I don't know when they passed it, but the law said that it was illegal to attempt it was illegal to perform any transgender surgery on minors. And it was a few other things involved, but that was the main thing. It's illegal to push LGBTQ of any kind on minors. And of course, the state of Tennessee was sued immediately. It worked its way up through the courts all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court ruled this morning that the law is allowed to stand. So in Tennessee, it's illegal to do any kind of medication, any kind of surgery in any way, shape. It's illegal to do anything to transform girls into boys or boys into girls. I was reading an article this morning on a lady who had, when she was about 14, she was told by her doctor, she was told by several doctors that she was really a boy because she acted out a lot. She had a lot of behavioral issues. And the reason for her behavioral issues was that she really was a boy. So at the demand of her doctor, she had the surgery. And then when she got older, she realized, I'm not a boy, I'm just a girl with behavioral problems. So then she tried to what do you call it when you detransition? Anyway, after you have surgery, you can never replace what you lost. And the medicine she took to help in the transition did permanent damage. She'll never be able to nurse children if she can even have children. And she has now gone on a campaign going places saying, hey, don't let them do this to you. This is what they did to me. Don't let them do it to you. In fact, I've still got the article at home. But how did we get from 50 years ago, you and I remember 50 years ago, how did we get from there to naked people walking down the street and men having surgery thinking they can become a woman, and woman having surgery thinking she can become a man? How did we get to the point where men can say, I'm a woman, and go in the girls' dressing room, the girls' locker room? How did we get there? Satan only departed for a season, and he came back and came back. He didn't try Jesus anymore, but he certainly kept trying in society. Now, in chapter 4, verse 11, then the devil leaveth him, and behold, angels came and ministered unto him. You remember the first temptation Satan tried on Jesus? Jesus was tired. He had gone 40 days of no eating, no drinking. And Satan said, you are starving, you're hungry. Just turn these stones into bread. And Jesus said, nope, it is written. And so he did not yield. By not yielding, when the Satan departed, God sent angels to minister unto Jesus. And as you can read in your notes, God had something far better than what Satan offered him. God sent angels who ministered. They no doubt probably brought him food from heaven. They brought him, whatever. They nourished him. They cared for him. And I thought of when we went through the 23rd Psalm, it was only after David went through the valley of the shadow of death that he was able to partake of the victory banquet table. We often like the shortcut. I like the shortcut on whether it be the grocery store or whatever. I like to find, if there's an easy way to do it, I will probably be the one to find it. But sometimes in trying to take the shortcut, we end up missing out on God's divine deliverance and God's victory banquet that we could have enjoyed. Remember when the disciples were out on the sea and it was a great storm and they went down? Jesus had said, let us go to the other to the other side. He already said we are going to the other side. Well, about halfway across, a storm came up. They got scared, ran down to the below the deck and said, Master, carest thou not that we perish? And Jesus took away the storm, but they lost a blessing they could have had they simply trusted Jesus to get them through the storm, not take the storm away. Now, the next thing that I found, and again, it depends on which gospel you look at as to when this took place. But the next thing that I put in, because it was the next thing I found in the book I'm using, was Jesus and John the Baptist. I'm not going to go into much detail, but you remember John the Baptist was the forerunner of Jesus Christ. He is the one that introduced Christ to all the world. He's the one that baptized Jesus and baptized all the people of the first church. But Herod was the king, and Herod fell in love with his brother's wife. Now that would be like me falling in love with Janet, my brother's ex-wife. Well, enough said. I hope I'm never that desperate and that bad off and that mentally incompetent. But anyway, John the Baptist rebuked. I got the best. Why would I want anything else? John the Baptist rebuked Herod and said, it is not right that you stole your brother's wife away from him. Well, Herod couldn't do anything because everybody practically worshiped John. But you recall his granddaughter danced, got him all excited, and in the height of his excitement, he swore, I'll give you anything you want, up to half of my kingdom. She went and asked her mother, who John the Baptist had condemned, and said, Mom, what do I want? And she asked for John the Baptist's head on a silver charger. Now, in Matthew 4:13, by the way, Herod gave her John the Baptist's head on a silver charger. How did Jesus react to the news of John's death? In Matthew 4:13, when Jesus heard of it, and verse 12 is talking about the death of John the Baptist. When Jesus heard of the death of John the Baptist, he departed thence by ship into a desert place apart. Two things jumped out at me. Three things. He departed. He had been surrounded by people. He had been doing all kinds of things. But when he heard of the death of John the Baptist, he left. He got away from the crowds. He got away by ship. Now, I've been doing a lot of reading lately because I love to read. And I read in it wasn't Reader's Digest. It was, it's either Reader's Digest or one of the magazines like that we get. They were talking about the healing benefits of water. You know, and I know from my experience, I have, in Ohio, when we moved to Texas, Ohio, there was a little creek about 3 or 4 miles from our church, and it was way back off the beaten road. You had to park and walk to get to the creek. But whenever I was under a lot of stress, having to make some tough decisions, I would go to that creek and I would just sit there by the creek and watch the creeks go by. And I remember one particular day, we had a major problem in the church, and I didn't know what to do. I was very concerned, perhaps even worried to a certain degree. So I went to this creek, and I just went to the very edge of the creek. The water was only about that deep. Now, out in the middle, it was over my head, but on the edge, the water was about that deep. So I went right up to the edge, and I just squatted down, and I began looking at all the creatures that were in there. Little bitty, teeny creatures, and they were swimming everywhere in this creek on the edge. And I remember I was concerned because I didn't know what the church was going to do, had no clue if I would be pastor or not, had no clue what was going to happen at all. And I remember squatting down there by the creek, watching those little bitty, I don't know what they were. I don't think they were fish, but whatever they were. And the thought hit me, if God cares for those little animals, he cares much more for me. And I got up, drove back home, and said, Lord, whatever happens, it's in your hands. And God worked it out to our favor, and God won the victory. In reading the article this morning, or yesterday, it was talking about finding, if you can, find a lake, get a small boat or a ski, whatever that motorized ski thing is that whatever. Get out in the water, away from the sounds, away from the people. Just get out in the water and reflect on God. And of course, the article was many pages long, but they went by ship. And the article said there is medical evidence that just being near a lake, or even if you can't go there, get out in the middle of a forest someplace. But preferably, he departed, got away by ship on a lake into a desert place apart. Now, he and the disciples got away, and I've already said most of that. I did look up the word desert in Strong's Concordance, and I love the definition. It means they departed thence by ship into a solitary, lonely, desolate, uninhabited desert or wilderness. In other words, they went someplace totally uninhabited. Sometimes you just need to get alone with you and God. When we were living in Tennessee, and I got a phone call that the church here voted to call me as pastor. And I didn't know what to do. I really didn't know what to do. So we had found on a school outing with our kids, a creek. It was about 10, 15, 20 miles out where the old covered bridge was. You don't remember that? We went there with our kids on a field trip or something. But I remembered that, and so I went way back up the creek, away from the roads, away from the paths, away from, everything, just me and the trees and the creek. And I spent almost a whole entire day there praying and asking God to lead me. Do I go to Grace in Florence or do I not? And I spent, I told Kathy, I said, I will not come home until I have a definite answer. I was gone just about all day before God finally gave me peace to come. But they went into an uninhabited place. You just need to get away from everything and everybody, and sometimes you just need to be you and God. No one else, you and God. In fact, some other people came. I went to a different area to get away from them. I didn't want any distractions. I wanted me and God talking, and I was prepared to stay all day and all night until God gave me peace one way or the other. Now, in Mark, he goes a little farther. And he said unto them, again, verse 30 tells us, it's right after he got news that John the Baptist was dead. By the way, he didn't in your body, but you need rest. I was reading, I get several health journals, and I was reading that lack of proper rest can increase the risk of dementia. It can increase the risk of, it had a whole list of things just by not giving your body the rest. Jesus, they're all excited. They just returned from a missionary journey, and they're excited, but they're also wiped out. And then they get the news, one of your dear friends died. And Jesus said, let's get away from here. You need time to grieve, and there is a grieving process. I don't worry about people at funerals that cry and grieve. I worry about the ones that don't. Because the ones that grieve and get it out of their system, they get it out of their system. Those who hold it in, by holding it in, they put stress on every organ of their body because they're holding all of that stress in. Jesus said, you're tired, you're hungry, and now you just got bad news. Let's get away from here. Let's go away and rest. And let's get something to eat. You guys, how long has it been since you ate? Not you, but how long has it been since you ate? Oh, Lord, we haven't eaten in a week. We were so busy preaching. Well, you need to get something to eat because your body needs that strength and that nourishment. And so he took them away from the stress and strain of life, got them apart so they could rest. I have been told most of my ministry that I need to take better care of myself. I've heard it from family, I've heard it from doctors, and I'm one of those people, I just can't hardly rest. I hate to fish, I hate to play golf, I don't like hunting. There's not much I do like, but everybody needs some time to just do nothing except rest. That's why God gave us the Sabbath day. The Sabbath day from creation. Not the law of Moses, but from creation was a day of rest. I don't know of very many people. The church is very generous with vacation. I don't remember if it's 4 weeks or 5 weeks after 20 years. But either way, my wife and I were counted up. We have never taken more than 1 or 2 weeks vacation a year since we've been here. For one thing, I don't like being away from here. You're my sheep. I feel a responsibility to be here. But the one time we did get away, years ago, it's been many years ago, we went to Roan Mountain. Yeah. It was so far up in the mountains, they had no TV, no telephone, no cell phone, no grocery stores. The closest Walmart was 2 hours away. I mean, you were up on the side of a mountain. There was nothing there to do. And the thoughts behind that is that most pastors are so busy, they don't take time to rest. And I plead guilty. I am one of the world's worst, and my doctors tell me that frequently. And I say, you're right, I need to. Why